Return to Via Dolorosa. Devotions for Lent. Chapter 4. What goes up must come down. Luke 9:28-36. Walter L. Liefeld said that the Transfiguration is the most significant event between Jesus' birth and his passion. It occurs around the time he was going to Jerusalem. God's glory is the single most covered attribute of God in the Bible. A few times more than his love, mercy, or forgiveness. The noun glory is mentioned 200 times in the Old Testament and 163 times in the New Testament. In the Old Testament, the priests could not continue to minister when the Lord's glory filled the house of God. Exodus 40:34, 1 Kings 8:11, 2 Chronicles 5:14, and 7:2. Why is God described as glorious in the Bible? How should we respond to His glory? Look to Him. There's no clearer vision. About 8 days after Jesus said this, he took Peter, John, and James with him and went up onto a mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. 2 men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. They spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. Peter and his companion were very sleepy, but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and 2 men standing with him. Luke 9:28-32. When my wife and I had a discussion on Moses and Joshua, I asked her if she had to choose between Moses or Joshua, who would she prefer to me? For me, I definitely didn't want to be in Moses' shoes or have his responsibility. Further, Joshua entered the promised land, but Moses did not. However, she said without hesitation, Moses. I asked why. She said Moses was the only person to see God's glory. I raised the stake and said how about Moses and Abraham, the father of faith. But she still answered Moses. Again, the answer was Moses saw God's glory. What is the one thing you want to see most of all? The greatest sight of all is not the 7 wonders of the world, the glory of the kingdoms of the world that Satan proposed. Matthew 4:8. The greatest skyscraper of the world, or the most scenic place in the world. Jesus gave us a preview to beholding His glory in heaven. What the disciples saw that day was incredible, incomparable, and indescribable. It was a spectacular, captivating, and amazed sight, experience, and discovery for the disciples. Peter, James, and John woke up to a stunning, dazzling, and breathtaking phenomenon. Jesus' face, appearance, and bodily form has changed, and it literally lit up the place, the sky and the mountain like flashlights, spotlights, and floodlights, illuminating a studio all at once. His clothes were bright as a flash of lightning, or literally in various passages, white and starry. The only time the word is recorded in the Bible, Luke 9:29. White as light or falls, Matthew 17:2. And whiter than anything on earth, Mark 9:3. Matthew 17:2 and Mark's Gospels 9:2 told us that Jesus was metamorphed or transfigured changed. But Luke alone specifically reveals that what the disciples saw in Jesus altered, verse 29, or more precisely, other, heteros in Greek, appearance was God's glory in verse 32. The three apostles saw, felt, and experienced who Jesus was, the Lord of glory, 1 Corinthians 2:8 and James 2:1. His glorious riches, Philippi 4:19. Glorious might, Colossians 1:11, and eternal glory, 2 Timothy 2:10. Hebrews 1:3 says, "The Son is the radiance of God's glory, an exact representation of His being, sustaining all things by His powerful word." According to John's Gospel, Jesus mirrored the glory of the Father, 1:14, the glory that He had with the Father before the world began, 17:5. The presence of Moses and Elijah was odd and unexpected, but their presence was necessary to confirm, record, and declare the glory of God's presence. Reader knows that Moses certainly saw God's glory, Exodus 33:22. But Elijah did not quite experience God's glory, upward in that sense or in the same language. So why was Elijah here? They shared a common experience, in that both Moses and Elijah saw the Lord pass by, Exodus 34:6, 1 Kings 19:11. So Elijah and Moses were qualified and invited to witness, cheer, and authenticate the fullness of Jesus' divinity, the splendor of His glory, and His power, majesty, and honor. The next amazing discovery was that Jesus' glory was ever bright, outshining and outlasting Moses and Elijah's glory. The appearance and presence of Elijah and Moses were astonishing, electrifying, and overwhelming. But their conversation was not about how they both lived, served, or ended, but about the death of Jesus. Jesus' death in Jerusalem was a glorious fulfillment of His prediction, John 18:32. Scripture and God's plan of redemption, Matthew 26:55, Luke 2:38. Moses, who represented the law, and Elijah the prophet were two of a kind in Jews' history. Not only did they dramatically experience the Lord's passing by, their miracles were unsurpassed, and their lives ended in a mysterious, suspenseful, and tricky manner. Moses was vigorous when he died on Mount Nebo, on the verge of the Promised Land, Deuteronomy 32:49, 34:5-7. And Elijah was not at a dying age when he was translated to heaven, 2 Kings 2:11. But as Luke 9:33 indicated, they were mere men, Luke 9:33. Their glorious splendor faded, Luke 9:32, and they vanished like smoke or vapor, digging out of sight and disappearing into thin air. What an interesting commentary on Moses and Elijah's life, the fleeting nature of life and the fate of all humankind. Live for Him. There is no clearer venture. 33. As the men were leaving Jesus, Peter said to Him, "Master, is it good for us to be here? Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what he was saying. Luke 9:33. Peter had no interest, motivation, attraction, stomach, urgency, and timeline to leave the peak and labor for souls. Whether Peter understood it or not, meant it or not, knew it or not, his proposal of permanent or temporary separation was emphatically rejected by the Lord, even though his idea made good sense and benefited everyone. If Jesus remained on the mountain, he would not need to suffer, bleed, and die in Jerusalem. The disciples' retirement benefits would then include a cabin in the mountain, a room with a view, and a front seat to a first-class spectacle. However, Peter's "let us make" exhortation was radically opposite Jesus' mission in life. Matthew 17:4, Mark 9:5. Jesus' group exhortation to his disciples in the Gospels was always, "Let us go." Mark 4:35, John 14:31. As typified by Mark 1:38. "Let's go somewhere else, to the nearby village, so I can preach there also. That is why I have come." When Lazarus was dead, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go to him." John 11:15. Though the Jews attempted to stone him, he said to his disciples' consternation, "Let us go back to Judah." John 11:7-8. And shortly later, even when he knew he was betrayed, he said, "Let us go," and rose to meet Judah, his betrayer. Mark 14:42, Matthew 26:46. In fact, the only time Jesus did not say, "Let us go," he said, "Let us leave." John 14:31. The Bible did not tell us that Jesus' suffering was glorious. No suffering is pretty. Jesus, however, was crowned with glory and honor because he suffered death for everyone. Hebrews 2:9, 1 Peter 1:11. Further, Jesus had no need for a tabernacle. He was the greater and more perfect tabernacle of God. Hebrews 9:11-12, Revelation 21:3. Who tabernacled or dwell among us. John 1:14. Are you in retirement mode? Inactive service? Are you sick and tired of the same old, same old? Would you rather go golfing, fishing, or bowling? Well, don't be. Rise up, be the good, faithful, and wise servant God intends for us to be. The third amazing thing was a voice from heaven that commanded the disciples to hear Jesus, follow instructions, and be obedient. Listen to him. There is no clearer voice. 34. While he was speaking, a cloud appeared and enveloped them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. A voice came from the cloud saying, "This is my Son, whom I have chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, they found that Jesus was alone. The disciples kept this to themselves and told no one at that time that they had seen. Luke 9:34-36. Obedience is a disciple's first lesson, continuing education, and ultimate test in life. It is a hard lesson and a thorough education, but a necessary and effective skill and habit to learn from Christian living. Why do we obey him? Peter concludes elsewhere in his epistle. For he received honor and glory from God and Father when the voice came to him from the majestic glory, saying, "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased." We ourselves heard this voice that came from heaven when we were with him on the scattered mountain. 2 Peter 1:17-18. Because of Jesus' humanity and obedience to death on the cross, God has exalted him to the highest place and given him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Philippi 2:8-11. The apostles who spoke most extensively of Jesus' glory described his honor and glory as forever eternal and majestic. 1 Peter 4:11, 5:10, 5:11, 2 Peter 3:18, 2 Peter 1:17. The passage began with Jesus talking with Moses and Elijah, and standing with them. Verse 32 in Greek, but ended with two forceful statements, again in Greek, emphasizing Jesus first and Jesus alone. This is a repetition of the words at Jesus' baptism, Matthew 3:17, Mark 1:11, Luke 3:22, with a stunning addition and a riveting climax. Him here, 35. And then Jesus monos, 36. Here is an imperative. It is required and not revisable. Moses and Elijah were two of the greatest figures in Israel history. Moses was rightly the founder and ancient Israel. He single-handedly brought Israel out of slavery. God himself buried Moses, Deuteronomy 32:49-50, Deuteronomy 34:7. Elijah did not die. He was translated and his body was not found. However mighty, godly, and imposing Moses and Elijah, they were tired souls with human weakness, and not the objects for our obedience. Moses and Elijah asked to die out of desperation. Numbers 11:15, 1 Kings 19:4. A sense of failure and not an act of faith, courage, or triumph. Conclusion. Today, we will experience and manifest God's glory unlike Old Testament people or New Testament disciples. We see God's glory in nature, humankind, and the Son, Jesus Christ. The Bible tells us that God's glory is great, Psalms 138:5, above the heavens, Psalm 8:1, and over all the earth, Psalm 57:5, 72:19. We were created for God's glory, Isaiah 43:7. However, we fell short of God's glory, Romans 3:23. But Jesus Christ had made known to us the riches of his glory, Romans 9:23. Christ's presence in us is the hope of glory, Colossians 1:27. In him we have received a rich and glorious inheritance, Ephesians 1:18. People have drawn paintings, built buildings, and compose the music for the glory of God. Even routine, unexciting, and taxing things like studying, working, traveling, and chores. How about you? Have you given God the glory His due name? Psalm 29, 2, 96, 8. Done all things for the glory of God. 1 Corinthians 10:31. Declared His glory among the nations and His marvelous deeds among all peoples. Psalm 96:3. We look forward to Jesus' second coming, when He will appear in the sky and ride the clouds. Matthew 24:30-31. In the glory of the Father and of the holy angels. Luke 9:26. Until then, are you teachable, willing to learn, make yourself count? Are you willing to seek His will, do His will no matter how hard, and submit your will to His will? Reflection and meditation. The Lord suffered greatly and was greatly glorified. If suffering comes to us today, would you ask the Lord to help you endure it with joy and test yourself, so that you may accomplish God's will for you, to glorify God and receive heaven's glory? The Lord gave up everything for us, so that we may obtain richness, glory, joy, and peace. Today, we are willing to forsake everything for the sake of the Lord. The Lord promises that He will give us more than what we have given up for Him today. May the Lord help me to be willing to dedicate myself to Him. Authors by Victor Yap, Doris Mok.